Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We will be talking about cultural responsiveness in regards to certain populations. So we are going to first start off with a video recording. This is an overview of cultural responsiveness, and I will share my screen so that you all can see the video.
Hello, everyone. My name is Carla Mena, and I'm going to be talking about cultural humility and cultural responsiveness in HIV service delivery. So let's explore the ways in which we can successfully incorporate culturally competent and culturally responsive strategies in HIV service delivery for our priority population to attain health equity and reduce disparities in our community together. So again, during this briefly introduction, we'll be discussing frameworks of cultural competency and cultural responsiveness in HIV service delivery. Race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, and many other societal factors are associated with HIV risk, treatment, adherence, and access to prevention. So this introduction was created because many providers in the HIV field are serving diverse populations of people across racial, ethnic, religious, gender, sexuality, and cultural contexts. And despite the progress in overall population health, disparities still exist. These disparities impact the health of minority populations and contribute to many health incidences. Experts will recognize the need to enhance the services for culturally and linguistically diverse populations. So providing culturally and linguistically appropriate services requires an understanding of cultural competence. So for this brief overview, we're going to be using the following definition of cultural competency. Cultural and linguistic competence is a segment of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, agency, or among professionals that enable effective work in cross-cultural situations. And this was adapted from research of Cross from 1989. So again, this introduction is designed to provide quick and short tips for providers directly and indirectly funded by CDC. And the aim is to guide you, the providers, in creating, implementing the culturally appropriate services to diverse populations. So this will elicit areas of need to yield to CBA requests, such as cultural competency, humility, and other organizational development and management trainings. The definition of culture refers to integrated patterns of human behavior that include the language, thoughts, communications, actions, costumes, beliefs, traditions, institutions of racial, ethnic, religious, or social groups. And the definition of competence implies having the capacity to function effectively as an individual and an organization within the context of the cultural beliefs, behaviors, and needs presented by consumers and their communities. And so therefore, cultural competence is a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, agency, or among professionals that enables effective work in cross-cultural situations. So now we're going to look at the cultural competency continuum. So I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to take this in. The cultural competence is a complex framework, and there is a tendency for systems and organizations to want a textbook solution, a quick fix, a recipe, or a how-to, step-by-step approach to being competent with regards to specific cultures. However, the complexity of achieving cultural competence does not allow for such an easy solution. And so the Cross et al. Framework emphasizes that the process of achieving cultural competency occurs along the continuum and sets forth 6 stages, including cultural destructiveness, cultural incapacity, cultural blindness, cultural pre-competence, cultural competence, and cultural proficiency. It is helpful for systems and organizations to conduct a self-assessment and use the results to set goals and plan for meaningful growth. And so the National Center for Cultural Competence, also known as the NCCC, developed the following system or organizational characteristics that may be exhibited at various stages along the cultural competence continuum. The characteristics delineated in this continuum are not meant to define a system or an organization, but rather they allow the systems and organizations to broadly gauge where they are and plan for positive movement and growth to achieve that cultural competence and cultural proficiency. The continuum is dynamic and not intended to be viewed as a linear manner. So the systems and organizations may be at different stages, at different times, with different populations and different cultural groups. And finally, the system and organizational capacity is not limited to the arrival at cultural competence or proficiency, as there is always room for continued growth. So cultural destructiveness is characterized by attitudes, policies, structures, and practices within a system or organization that destructively impacts a cultural group. This stage on the continuum acknowledges one way of being and purposely denies any other cultural approach. This is also the most negative end of the continuum, represented by attitudes, policies, and practices that are destructive to cultures and consistently to the individuals within specific cultures. So historically, some agencies have been actively involved in services that have denied people of color access to their natural helpers or healers, removed children of color from their families based on race, or purposely risk the well-being of minority individuals in social and medical experiences without their knowledge or consent. The second stage of the continuum is cultural incapacity. The cultural incapacity is the lack of responding effectively to the needs, interests, and preferences of individuals based on culture, language, race, sexual orientation, religion, socioeconomic status, country of origin, and nationality, or other groups that are based on extremely biased views towards those outside of the culture other than your own. So a system or agency does not intentionally seek to be culturally destructive, but rather lacks the capacity to help minority clients or communities. So this can look like not providing bilingual personnel when needed, disproportionate allocation of resources that may benefit one cultural group over another, or subtle messages that some cultural groups are neither valued nor welcome, and lower expectations for some cultural, ethnic, or racial groups. The third stage in the continuum is cultural blindness. And it is important to note that at this stage, it may be difficult to grasp for some people because most people believe that they are very culturally competent, but these individuals might instead be within the stage of the continuum and not know it. So cultural blindness is an expressed philosophy of viewing and treating all people as the same while ignoring the differences. An excellent example of cultural blindness is equality versus equity debate. Equity is giving everyone what they need to be successful, while equality gives everyone the same thing regardless of their needs. Equality aims to promote fairness, but it can only work if everyone starts from the same place and it's the same help. Some of those examples are workforce that lack diversity, an institution that does not attend to persons with disabilities in office buildings, so lack of ramps to accommodate for people, persons who use wheelchairs. Another one would be approaches in the delivery of services that ignore cultural strengths. So ethnocentric approach to services, and that looks like implementing an intervention that has not been proven to be effective for African-American population, but has worked well with another racial ethnic group. The fourth stage in the continuum is the cultural pre-competence. So this is the level of awareness within the systems or organizations of their strengths and areas for growth to respond effectively to cultural and linguistically diverse populations. This can look like an organization that can make the agency more welcoming with pictures, magazines, and musics that reflect the cultures of the community. This also includes using signage that allows clients to choose which bathroom they want to use regardless of their gender. Another example would include hiring practices that support a diverse workforce. And the fifth stage is cultural competence. Cultural competence is the demonstration of acceptance and respect for cultural differences. This is shown as an organization's ability to integrate principles of community engagement that results in the reciprocal transfer of knowledge and skills between all consumers, collaborators, partners, and key stakeholders. And some examples are a mission statement that articulates principles and values for cultural and linguistic competence in all aspects of the organization, specific policies and procedures that integrate cultural and linguistic competence into each core function of the organization, ongoing education of the one person and others. And the last stage of the continuum is cultural proficiency. So cultural proficiency within a system or organization is the ability to hold culture in high esteem while using it as a foundation to guide all of their endeavors. Organizations seeking to add to the knowledge learned from cultural competency practice by conducting research, influencing approaches to care, and improving relationships with diverse groups. So here's some of the examples that we have. Develop and disseminate health and mental health promotion materials that are adapted for specific cultural groups, such as the clear intervention that was adapted to suit HIV negative persons, and having bilingual literature for agencies that serve people whose primary language is not English and it is Spanish. Actively pursuing resource development to meet the intended priority population, such as being able to differentiate the needs of all learners, and continually enhancing and expanding the organization's capacity in cultural and linguistic competence. Also advocating alongside and on behalf of populations who are traditionally underserved. And although there is an expectation of personal change and transformation with cultural proficiency, alliance with groups other than our own and lifelong self-assessment and reflection is how we move forward. So with that, I will leave you. I hope that you have been able to understand a little bit better what the cultural competency continuum looks like. Thank you so much.
So, sorry, how does everyone feel? Please feel free to comment or ask any questions about that. Thank you so much to my colleague for recording that video. I actually wanted to take a few moments to also share some slides on cultural responsiveness that talk about the different tenets of the idea of cultural responsiveness, and I will pull those up and share them in just one moment. So really quickly. So there are a few slides I just wanted to take a moment just to talk about really quickly. Share my screen here. So when we're talking about cultural competency, it's really important to remember a couple of things. First, that culture is very complex. I like this image here because it really represents what we see when we think about culture and what culture actually is. As we see, this is an iceberg, and above the iceberg, we see the surface culture, which is things like food, flags, festivals, fashion, holidays, performances, dances, and language and literature. But then when we dive a little deeper into the deep cultural aspects of cultures, we see that there are communication styles, facial expressions, gestures, the way you hold eye contact or don't hold eye contact. There are also ideas about courtesy and manners and how you respect those who are older than you and how you treat those that are younger than you. Also, some things that encompasses deep cultural aspects is some of those things are informed by a culture's religion or a person's religion, their marriage, how they raise their children, and how they solve their problems. So culture is not just anything surface level. There are things much deeper than that. Also wanted to talk a little bit, of course, in the video, we talked about cultural competency, cultural humility, and cultural responsiveness. We also talked about the continuum. I also wanted to take a moment to look at this diagram. This shows kind of the intersection of cultural humility and cultural responsiveness. As you can see across the top, we have the different cultures or different racial or ethnic identities like African American, Asian American, Hispanic, Latino. We see all of those things. And then we go down on this left side and we see individual level, clinical level, program level. And throughout the middle of, I guess, the cube, you see where we hit cultural awareness, cultural knowledge, and cultural knowledge of behavioral health, and also cultural skill development. So these are the core elements, and this kind of makes up the foci of culturally responsive services. Also, wanted to show this diagram, which really shows that cultural humility and cultural responsiveness, all of these things are on a continuous process. The continuous process, it talks about, it shows these arrows and how each one of these arrows fits into the wheels of this diagram. And all of these different things, cultural competence, cultural humility, and cultural responsiveness, all of these things flow into each other, and it is a continuous process. And last but not least, of course, one size does not fit all. Doing an assessment is the first step to deciding an intervention. As we mentioned in the previous slide, it is an ongoing and continuous process. It provides a better understanding of the focused population and their needs that should be taken into account for a multitude of their experiences they have felt in their environment and in their population. So I wanted to see really quickly, pause right there just for a moment. Okay. Pause for a quick moment here and just kind of check in and see if everything is going okay with everyone. Um, um, I sent the link. Hold on one moment. I did email, I emailed the link a few moments ago because she emailed me. Okay, just one second. All right, so moving forward, I did have a couple of questions that I wanted to kind of share with everyone. We're going to use the Mentimeter for this. And this is just kind of trying to do a dive into what cultural responsiveness looks like in the regions that we serve. I just wanted to get an idea of what certain organizations are doing as we speak to represent cultural responsiveness and to be to meet the needs of their clients in a cultural way. So I'm going to share my screen, and I'm also going to drop in the chat a Mentimeter code. And if you could please take the time to type in your answer. Doesn't matter if you see the same thing pop up, it's totally fine. We want to hear what everyone has to say. Even if there are duplications, we do still want to have a conversation about those things. So this is the link to the Mentimeter. You should be able, once you click on that, you should be able to see and add in a response to the question. Good morning. We have some people coming in. So I see so far we have increased education, better trainings. Good morning, Kelsey.
Good morning. I'm so sorry. I never received the link for today's session.
I'm so sorry. So I really don't know what happened with that, because it was set to send a reminder email to everyone this morning. So I'm not sure what happened with that. I am so sorry. And I just received an email like a few moments ago, and I was like, oh my gosh, and I was trying to get it out.
It's okay. Things like that happen. I've been trying to get in since before 10.
Oh my gosh, I am so sorry.
That's okay. I'm just hoping we didn't miss too much, my team and I.
No, we can do a recap.
Looks like some other people are still joining.
Yes, they're still coming in. I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and then I'm gonna give it a few moments for others to come on in.
Okay.
I am so sorry about the confusion with that.
Oh, that's okay. We just wanted to make sure that, that we didn't miss something on our end.
I'm gonna have to go back and take a look and see what happened with that. But I'll give it a few more moments to let some more people trickle in if they were like, good morning, Jora. I shared the recording that's also on Hubelo about it's a cultural responsiveness video. I shared the video at the beginning, and then I went through a few of the slides that I have on cultural responsiveness. So I'm gonna go through those again. I only hit a few of the slides, the ones that specifically spoke about different diagrams and different I'm trying to think of the word for it was just different tenets of cultural responsiveness. I'm going to share my screen so we can do a quick recap and get into our conversation for today. Just give me one moment.
Yeah, other people are starting to come on now. I don't think we were the only ones who had that issue this morning.
I guess not, which
explains why so few people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And I double checked this morning to make sure that it was sent, that it would be sent out. So I see that Hubelo is on the job. They are sending it out.
Yeah.
People are
things happen. We're flexible.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you for being patient. I'm gonna give it about 3 more minutes, see if we have some more people coming in. We do have people coming in.
You do have people coming in. Yeah, everybody's showing up all at once. Yeah.
All at once.
I eventually just emailed Carlos and he was right on it.
Okay.
Yeah, so everybody's trickling in at the same time.
Perfect.
Like we're all late for class. We don't have an excuse though. We don't have a written excuse.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm very lenient. All righty. Well, I think I'll go ahead and keep going. I'm so sorry, everyone, for the confusion. So I'm gonna go ahead and since we have some more people joining us today, I'm gonna go ahead and re-talk about some of the slides that I talked about right before you all came in. Just some more in-depth information about cultural responsiveness. On the Hublot, there are some pre-recorded videos, and included in that is a video about cultural responsiveness. So this particular slide set, it's really just talks about the difference between culture, talks about the complexity of cultures, also goes into a little bit of detail about cultural responsiveness and the continuum. And so I'm going to share my screen so I can go through this with you all. Okay. My PowerPoint loves to give me closed captions. It does work though. All righty, so this is our slide deck. This is a slide deck I created for cultural competency, humility, and responsiveness. And it just talks about, the first thing we want to talk about, of course, is intersectionality, which is kind of a term that's used quite often. Right in this time, we talk a lot about intersectionality and kind of meeting the needs of people based on the fact that they meet all these different social categories. So the interconnectedness of social categorizations such as class, race, and gender, as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping and interdependent systems of discrimination and disadvantage. As you can see on this diagram, we see that intersectionality meets at the intersection of race, gender identity, sexual orientation, class, and religion. A lot of things that inform people kind of are in that intersection. And so it's important to make sure we understand what that term means and also have an intersectional approach to how we provide services. So to define culture, culture refers to the integrated patterns of human behavior that include the language, thoughts, actions, customs, beliefs, values, and institutions of racial, ethnic, and religious or social groups. And I wanted to show this diagram. I love this diagram. It really shows what culture is and what culture encompasses. It shows that culture is very, very complex. On the surface, we have things like food, flags, festivals, fashion, those things that we kind of see on a day-to-day basis. But beneath the surface, we have a lot of deep cultural aspects that really inform how people behave, their beliefs, their values. So under the deep culture, at the bottom of the iceberg, we see things like facial expressions or gestures. I know in my family, I know it like with my mother and my aunts and stuff, they have a facial expression they give you, and I know exactly what that facial expression means. I have gotten it many times throughout my life, especially in the store when I was younger and I wanted something. Everyone knows that look your mother gives you. That is something that is a cultural thing. We all have seen that. We all have these little cultural things that our families and our friends that we do that kind of represent and kind of build upon and build up the personalities and the beliefs that we have. Also want to talk about, of course, cultural competency, humility, and responsiveness. So during this session today, we're really going to talk about these three things and also the difference between these three terms. And using these terms in HIV services or prevention services is very important because it kind of helps us engage our clients in the best way. So to start, cultural competency is a complex framework that is there for systems and organizations. And systems and organizations sometimes kind of want to look at things in a textbook solution, but there is no textbook solution to certain things. You kind of have to take cultural competency into account when you're thinking about dealing with different clients and different groups of people. There is no one set way to deal with people. We are all different. So cultural competency is a set of congruent behaviors, attitudes, and policies that come together in a system, agency, or among professionals that enables effective work in cross-cultural situations. We also have cultural humility. Cultural humility is a process that requires humility as individuals continuously engage in self-reflection and self-critique as lifelong learners and reflective practitioners. So we bring into the check the power imbalances that exist in the dynamic of provider and patient communication. And we do that by using patient-focused interviewing and care. As the definition states, cultural humility is a lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique. And then we have cultural responsiveness, and this targets the services provided to the client at various levels of the organization. This can be the staff, the programming, the administration, even down to the types of materials that you have for clients to take as resources. All of these things should be cultural responsiveness and should be cultural responsive and reflect the respect of different cultures in what you produce and what you share with your clients. So the video went really in depth about the continuum of cultural competency. I'm just going to talk about each one very briefly. So cultural destructiveness is is like things like the forced assimilation, the subjugation of cultural aspects, rights and privileges for only dominant groups only. We also have cultural incapacity. So this is racism. It maintains the stereotype, things like unfair hiring processes. We also have cultural blindness, which is, everyone is the same. All the differences are ignored. These are people that say like, oh, I don't see color. That's cultural blindness, not really respecting or understanding or even acknowledging that there are differences. And differences are beautiful and they are important. Cultural pre-competence. This is where you explore where the cultural issues are. It's committed to assessing the needs of the organization and the individuals. When you get to the next step, which is cultural competence, this is where you're able to recognize individual and cultural differences and seek advice from various diverse groups, and also the ability to hire culturally unbiased staff. And then lastly, we have cultural proficiency, which is the ability to implement changes to improve the services based upon the cultural needs. This is one diagram that is it seems a little complicated at first when you look at it, but once you break it down, it makes a lot of sense. When you look at the top left corner, you see that there are racial and culturally specific groups listed. And then we go down on the left side, you see that there are the levels: individual, program level or clinical level, and then we have organizational or administrative level. And then across that space, you see cultural awareness, cultural knowledge of behavioral health, and cultural skill development. This is important because this shows what the foci of cultural responsive services looks like. And it basically shows that all of these things should intersect at some point in time. And it shows in the middle the cultural humility and the cultural responsiveness. It shows it as a cycle with arrows leading to each one to show that this is a continuous cycle. We also have this, which also has arrows showing that each one of these wheels, competence, humility, and responsiveness, they all feed into each other and they function together and they work like a gears in a clock. So there is no one set point of where one of these ends and the other begins. So as an organization, to be culturally competent, you need to follow this, this continuous process of self-reflection, implementing different protocols and different norms that really feed into being culturally responsive so that your clients or even your employees or even your administrative staff, they feel welcome and they feel understood, and they also feel like they belong and people are thinking about what their culture looks like when they are treating them or speaking with them about their health. So one thing to take from all of that I just said is that one size does not fit all. You should do a formative assessment. It's the first step in defining defining your intervention. It's an ongoing and a continuous process. It provides a better understanding of your focus population and their needs by taking into account their experiences in their population and their environment. It's extremely important with the implementation of a successful intervention, whether it's behavioral, structural, or biomedical. So really quickly, just wanted to check and see if anyone has any questions about what I just shared. All right. Well, it's good to see all of you all again. And I know we didn't do an icebreaker. Do y'all want to take a moment to do an icebreaker, or you want to just keep going? Okay. All right. So to begin, keep going. Okay. So I also we enjoyed and we've been really having some really great conversations throughout these last 2 days that we've been together. And so we want to kind of keep that vein going. And I want to take the time to ask with you all, what are some of the ways that your organization is practicing cultural responsiveness currently? So we talked a lot about building cultural responsiveness and maintaining cultural responsiveness. What are you all doing currently in your organization that that really shows that you are being culturally responsive to your clients? I'm gonna drop into the chat the link for the Mentimeter. And so I just want to hear and see from you all and see what are some things that you all are currently doing. And if you want to unmute, you can also unmute. This session is meant to be a conversation. We kind of want to talk about some cultural aspects and how we can better engage people that are different from us. I identify as a Black cisgender woman. My experiences are different than someone who was a Latinx transgender woman or anyone else aside from Black cisgender women. My experience is different than their experience. And so as a person that works in this field and has provided services, I take pride in trying to not quite, I don't know if I could quite, people say walk a mile in someone's shoes. I think that's like a cliche that people say. I don't think I'll be able to walk a mile in that person's shoes, but I can be understanding of their culture. I can be understanding of their life. We can find similarities within what I have experienced in my life and what they have experienced in their life. And we can take those things and we can grow from them. So I just want to take a moment just to see what are some of the things that you all do currently that kind of builds or kind of show cultural responsiveness. And I dropped the link in there. Please let me know if that is not working. Okay. Alrighty. Hold on one second. I'm going to try this. Okay. Try this one. This one might work. Try that link. I see here sign in paperwork and forms include various genders. That's great. That's really important. I know when I used to do HIV testing, when I first started, the forms did not have anything other than male or female. And then throughout time that passed, they added more options. They put trans, and now I think they do say non-binary, if I'm not mistaken. I believe so. But also another thing, someone taught me long ago that it's okay to ask somebody what their pronouns are, or ask what they want to be referred as. That's an important thing that people need to know as well. It's okay to ask. You should not assume as well, or you could call somebody by their name. That's kind of my rule of thumb. I call people by their names. I don't put any pronouns when I speak to people, especially those that I don't know, I'm not familiar with. I would just use their name in place of a pronoun. And that has worked for me. Okay, we see updated paperwork. Any more ways that your organization is culturally responsive currently? Okay. Pronouns, including the staff signatures, yes. I usually have my pronouns in my Zoom name, but I had to change it at the last minute. I forgot to add it. Use of interpreters, very important. Hands United, we and our colleagues, Latinos in the South, we are very focused on language justice. So a lot of our programming provides translation, live translation during our sessions. And that's one of the focuses of our organization is, of course, creating a space where people feel comfortable in whatever language they may speak. Okay. All right. So we have 2 entries. Okay, so it seems that maybe there is maybe a lack of culturally responsive practices currently. So the next question, hopefully we'll have more responses on this one. The next question is what are ways that you can improve the cultural responsiveness? So we kind of started a little bit earlier. So we have increased education, better trainings. So what are some ways that you all can think of that you can improve the cultural responsiveness in your organizations now? When whoever put better trainings, what kind of trainings would you like? Would you like more cultural responsiveness trainings? Would you like motivational interviewing trainings? What kind of trainings are you specifically speaking of?
I would say I actually added that, and I would say that being creating spaces in which we can have these conversations is great, and making sure that we are, yes, having those difficult conversations, increasing the education without necessarily having to shame anybody, but rather say, okay, like if someone says HIV positive folks, then when we respond, we can say people living with HIV. And there are many, many, many other ways in which we can do that. So it can be a difficult conversation. It could be more education on people first language. And that then ties in with the better trainings.
Thank you for sharing. I used to have, I think I might still have it in my email. I was sent a paper that had people first language for all these different terms that we use in like service provision. It had the term that was most commonly used, and it had like the people's first language. So of course you mentioned HIV, HIV positive people versus people living with HIV. Those were the types of things that it was a great resource, actually. I'm gonna try to find that. Okay, we have some more comments coming in. We have diversify the staff. Yes. Representation, learning who you serve, meet people where they are. These are all very important to understanding. Not only do we need to understand the culture of the people that we serve, we also should understand the culture of the communities that we're in. So you're in a community that is predominantly, Latinx community, understanding some of the cultural aspects and some of the things that are important to people of Latinx descent is important to be able to engage them and also be able to keep them there. Even, of course, the first thing we think of is language. Language is like the easiest way or the most known way to engage someone is with language. If you speak their language, they are able to communicate with you. And so representation and diverse staff is very key. And also something that I learned working with certain populations, for instance, where I'm from, there is a pretty large Haitian population where I'm from. And so we, as an organization, we were having, and not Hands United, another organization, we were having a lot of issues engaging the Haitian community. And so we would do a lot of translation, like a lot of the documents, the testing documents, the prep documents, a whole entire prep toolkit was translated into Spanish and Creole, but people were still not engaging. People were not taking the information. And it wasn't until we had a Haitian consultation where we invited people that were kind of prominent in the Haitian community. We had pastors, we had doctors, dentists, community members, people that worked at the organization that I worked at. We all met together and we talked about what things were needed within the Haitian community. How can we better engage the Haitian community? And what we found out was that translation on paper doesn't always translate the information correctly. It doesn't always translate correctly from English to Creole or from English, Spanish, then to Creole. It doesn't translate properly. So the best way to engage that population, especially in South Florida, is through the radio. They have radio stations that will broadcast like church services or specific kinds of music. And those were the areas where we needed to concentrate our marketing, what we needed to put it on the radio station. And if we had not had that, that consultation and learned about things that that the Haitian community needed, we would have never known that it would be better to put things on the radio instead of giving out like actual paper or translated materials. And so that was something that we learned by learning or trying to get a better understanding of the cultural aspects, the language of the populations that we were trying to reach. I've had plenty of difficult conversations in my time as well.
And also too, this is Demetrius. Also speaking on the meet people where they are, I think a lot of times we want people to progress in health a lot faster than they're willing to. So if this is someone's first HIV test and it comes back negative, they may not necessarily be ready to be on PrEP if they just are trying to normalize testing. So when people say, oh, I'm not ready for that, to understand that they aren't a lost cause, but it's a progression in the way that they view health and the way that they protect themselves and things of that nature. So if someone says, no, I'm not interested in PrEP, that's okay. Okay, cool. Well, let's schedule you for 6 months from now so we can make testing a regular thing. And it may be during that second testing session that they're ready for PrEP, or they're ready to, look into other means to protect themselves, but just to not give up on people because they say no to PrEP the first time.
And that is so funny that you just said that, because I had a conversation last night with a friend of mine who went to get tested, and the doctor was, or the testing person was asking them about getting on PrEP. And my friend was like, I I don't know if I'm ready. Like I just really found out about this. And that is so true. You have to meet people where they are. They may not be ready for prep, and that's okay. Just educate them and let them get there when they get there. All we can do is, help guide people as best as we can. Thank you for sharing, Demetrius. Does anyone else have any ways that cultural responsiveness can be improved in your organization? Okay. Alrighty, so I will stop sharing my screen and I guess open the floor up to having a discussion. We did have we also are going to share the Padlet as well. We have 3 different Padlets that we want to share with you all. One is for women. Of course, this session is talking about cultural responsiveness. And so 3 of the populations that we really want to talk about were the MSM population, the trans community, and also for women. Because those are the 3 groups that are kind of carrying the highest burden of HIV in the United States and also making up for the least amount of people engaged in HIV prevention services, not just PrEP and InPEP, but also just overall testing, overall engagement in sexual health. Those are the 3 populations that are kind of carrying the burden of those disparities. So I'm going to share my screen. One moment. Y'all are mighty quiet today. Okay. Alrighty. So the first one I'm going to share is focusing on the MSM population. And so as we talked about a little bit earlier this week, this Padlet serves as kind of a roadmap to building up your cultural responsiveness in your organization. This one is a little different than the ones that we've shared before because it kind of talks about specific demographics. We have here youth and adults. Yesterday we talked about certain populations in I think it was in our break, our stigma. When we were talking about stigma, we talked a lot about youth. We talked about different things in regards to cisgender Black women, and we also talked about women of color as well. So because we have specifically geared Padlets, these are important because we can really kind of take a look at these at this and use it as a map to build a way to be better culturally responsive to these groups as well. There's also some resources on here, and I would invite any of my colleagues on here that want to kind of take a stab at working on this with our participants today. I don't want to call his name, but he's know who I'm talking about.
Hey.
It's you.
So we just gonna walk through
Yeah, I think we should walk through and hope maybe add in some things. I'm gonna share it in the chat so that we can kind of work on it collaboratively as a group. We can do maybe the first 2 columns, and then we could go to the women, and then we can also visit the trans Padlet and kind of talk about that as well before we I guess end for the day.
Okay. Awesome. You gonna type in for me or you want me to?
I can type it in.
I sure appreciate that. Okay, y'all. So actually I'm gonna click on and put stuff into myself. So again, this is day 3, and I know we've discussed before what the Padlet is for and what it serves as a guide to do in terms of collectively addressing the different difficulties that exist in your particular state and area as it relates to prep. So today specifically, we're focusing on engaging MSM, youth and adults, particularly those of color. So in terms of the first pillar that talks about common agenda, as we talked about that before, our common agenda specifically with this Padlet is to increase or enhance the awareness of PrEP and the uptake among youth, particularly young, gay, bi, same gender loving men of color. So in terms of what you guys currently do, what you wish you can do if you had other resources, what exactly are some other things that you want to do or ideas that you have surrounding increasing or enhancing PrEP awareness? And with this, of course, the goal ultimately at times is to get more people on PrEP, but also too, an important part or an important step, again, in meeting people where they are is to enhance their experience, enhance how people are connected to PrEP. In terms of this, as an example, maybe everyone's introduction to PrEP shouldn't be as the result of a negative test, just simply just the knowledge thereof. Hey, you're not here for testing or anything, but this is what PrEP is. I don't even know if you're eligible for it, but you may know somebody who is. That's a part of enhancing someone's experience, just so they're more knowledgeable of it. It doesn't seem like something that's so foreign. And some of your best people, your best advocates, your best advertisers for your services are people who don't even utilize your services, but they know that you're present and that you're there. If anybody want to chime in at any moment, I'm all ears, I'm all eyes.
All ears and all eyes. That was funny.
Hi, Demetrius. This is Jora. One of the things that we're doing in Alabama, we can advertise, market, and educate, and I think we'll talk about the financing of PrEP later. There's so much that we want to do, and I'm just going to put the HIV managers on blast and ask them to chime in. That becomes an issue because then we are inundated with phone calls about PrEP, but then we also run into, again, the issue of the affordability of PrEP. So that's an issue I know we at the health department have because we don't provide PrEP services. We can educate and market, but we can't purchase PrEP. So, and I know that's a topic of later on this afternoon, but that was the first thing that came to mind when talking about, you know, when Demetrius asked the question, what is it that we want to do? Because there's so much we want to do, but again, the finances are an issue.
Absolutely. And before your people chime in, this is another one of those things of why this type of essence is like important, because if you don't necessarily have the knowledge or offer the services, building that collective impact of, hey, we don't offer that here, but this organization here does. Or even just, oh, we've been getting an influx of calls about PrEP, whatever the case may be. We have a relationship with this organization where they have somebody on staff who knows how to churn this information out, or we have somebody on staff who knows how to churn it out. Give me just a moment, I'll get you over to our PrEP expert, and someone is just there to be like, okay, yeah, let me tell you all about PrEP. Let me tell you about your needs and that kind of thing. Just tapping into current in-house resources and communal resources of organizations that you guys have built a relationship with while here. But I'll let your staff go ahead and tap in.
Go forward. I see they left me hanging.
And that's all right. So we appreciate you, but yeah, we're just introducing this just as those first two steps. A lot of times an interesting way to talk about barriers is to remove the idea of funding and limitations or whatever the case may be, and just talk about what you would like to do for PrEP. And then once you talk about what you would like to do for PrEP, and then you go back into the realism of what you can and cannot do, then you see what those barriers are instantly. Like you said about in terms of everything that you want to do, but you don't offer that as a service. That's a barrier. So an important part or an important moving forward is to have those collective resources across the state or even close to you. Back to you, Shayla.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Demetrius. Another barrier that I was about to mention is we kind of mentioned it a couple times throughout the last 2 days is just overall like representation or education about prep in this younger or even adults MSM community. So some people don't know about it. So even just in like education, especially when we're talking about youth, we talked about how some places, the education around sex and sexual health is about abstinence. And that's fine. Abstinence, it can be talked about, but there also needs to be more education about overall sexual health as well. So people may not even know that that is an option, or may not even be aware of it. To be quite honest, I feel like my nephew, he's a youth, he's not MSM, but if I were to ask him about prep, I guarantee you he wouldn't know anything about it. So honestly, I'm sure, I don't even know what he would know about, but I'm pretty confident that he would not know what prep is. And so maybe just having a little bit more education around that could be a barrier for youth or MSM population.
Absolutely. And another thing too, even just when talking to youth, based on my experience, I know what it looked like for me to be 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, as I continue to list the years that I've been. And there exists this sense of invincibility that a lot of times we don't even tap into. A lot of people don't see a need for prep, but don't see a need for this because in their mind, the levels that they use for prevention or protection is adequate. They feel like, oh, I only have sex with people that I know. And for them, that's enough. I don't necessarily do penetration. So they don't think about STDs being transmitted any other type of way because they feel that the knowledge that they have is enough and that it's adequate. So a lot of times too, it's like let's just pretend that you're not invincible. What is something you think that you're doing that may not be the safest way or a better way that you can enhance the way in which you engage in sex? And that'll kind of unlock things and allow people who are young and only have a limited amount of information about sex transmission, things of that nature, to kind of look at it as a whole. Because as simple as telling someone, you can also get an STD that way, can really blow their mind and be like, wait, so oral sex can also transmit something? And you'd be like, yeah, it can. Just those kind of small nuances as well.
Yeah, for some reason, people think like oral sex is like not sex. I'm like, it's sex.
Look, what I say all the time, if it's genitals to pink part, it's sex.
That's a good one.
It
that's very true.
You should always just get your pink parts tested. That's it.
Get your pink parts tested. Thanks. That's testing. What is it? Marketing.
Right.
Your pink parts tested.
Jora also came to the chat and said, oh, I'm sorry, this is Jackie in the Southeast District, said that they like to get into the school system to educate 11 to 12th graders at least. And that's also an interesting aspect. I'm not sure about the laws. I think you guys touched on them a little bit about how people in the state of Alabama can access care. I'm sure there's a lot of hoops you have to go through to even get into the school systems. So a lot of times even like intervention programs kind of tap into after school programs rather than actual school systems. So that may be a way to kind of talk to 11 and 12 graders, is to realize where they hang, what they do after school, and then kind of engage them through after school activities, gauge them through like community efforts and different things like that. So that would be interesting. If you kind of want to expand on that, Jackie, about your experience about going into the school system, we'd love to hear it. All right, do we have any other additions? All right, thank y'all. That's the first paddler.
I just wanted to add that we do have some resources here. We talked a little bit about language options. I will also be adding some more resources at the end of the Institute. I'll be adding more resources that you all can access at the conclusion of the Institute. Alrighty, so let's go to I see I have a chat, the trans and non-binary board, which my colleague Carla is going to lead.
She's not currently with us, so we can tag team that one.
Okay, we could do that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Let me just make sure I have it up and ready. One moment, of course.
Education for the most part.
Yeah.
Jackie said that school systems are closed to sex education for the most part. They're difficult to get in.
Yeah, I would imagine like schools are hard to get in. I actually have done testing at one high school back in South Florida. The people were upset. Okay. The people were very upset. That's all I will say. It was, you know how you see those pictures of like what's that church? The Westboro church. They're like protests outside of funerals and stuff. It was legit like that.
Oh, wow.
It was a lot. But I did get like 4 tests. So, that I guess it was worth it. And I educated quite a few people. The kids honestly weren't even sure about getting tested. That's the thing, is like the actual teens themselves they said, I think I want to ask my mom or my dad if I can get tested, but you can give me some information. And that was all I really wanted to do. It was a few of them that were of age, that were 18, that agreed to get tested. They were seniors in high school. But like the younger kids, they were saying, I need to talk to my mom first about it. I need to talk to my dad first about it, but can I take some information? I'm like, y'all are doing a good job of raising your kids. They're not just going to do anything because somebody told them to. They're literally saying, I need to talk to my parents about this, but I want some information too. And I thought that was important that I experienced that with, teens, because the argument, of course, is that, oh, well, teens don't know enough, kids don't know enough. We need to teach them more. We need to keep this away from them. They know what they should and should not do, and they know what they want their parents to chime in on those things as well. That was my experience going to a high school.
Exactly. And you can ask any 11th or 12th grader. They've had at least one classmate in each grade since probably 8th grade that has had a child.
Yeah.
So it's like walking around school seeing someone who's pregnant isn't far-fetched to them, or so they know that people are engaging in sex even if they aren't. Or it's even one of those things. I would say with me and my experience when it comes to school and sex education, you hear about HIV testing, but because picking back off of what Kelsey has said in the chat about kids aren't the issue, your parents kind of instilled this stigma of attaching HIV to homosexuality. So even if you think that you are, or you're still exploring that, the idea of getting tested is so foreign or something that you don't want to engage in, because if I can't tell my friends that I got tested for HIV, because now the question is, why are you doing that? Because the stigma of what it's attached to. So just simple education, especially of the parents, can really like enhance their kids' ability to, if they can, pursue like tests or see what exploring their health on their own looks like.
Very true.
I totally agree with Demetrius. And even through my experience with working with the kids in the schools, they're going to ask the questions. We could be talking about healthy and unhealthy relationships. We could be talking about dating violence, and sex is going to always come up. Always. So, whether they want sex education in the schools or not, the children have questions. And like I said, the kids aren't the issue. It's the adults in their lives that are hindering them from gaining the knowledge. So it's definitely not the kids.
I agree. It's not the kids. And also the fact that we're in the Bible Belt here in Alabama, and
yeah, because nobody's having
things like that. Right. We don't do things like that. We are just a clean state. So no, we don't dare do things like that. And if we don't do it, why are we talking about it? It's just like,
exactly,
just sweep it up under the rug. And that's just something that we just don't do. So if and broke don't fix it, but we know better than that because we see the other side of it.
Exactly. We don't want to talk about sex education, but we still continue to see teens, have kids.
Exactly.
So somebody's doing it.
Somebody's doing something.
Okay.
A lot of people doing a lot of something.
Yes, exactly.
I know.
It ain't me.
I know that I remember when I was in middle school, and it's probably one of the first time I actually ever seen someone as young as they were like be pregnant. But when I was in middle school, we had someone in our class, and we were all 12 and 13, and they were pregnant with their second child. And it was one of those things that no one was like speaking about. And we're all sitting here like, oh, what did we miss? This is she was pregnant when I was in 6th grade too. It's wild.
That's a lot.
That is a lot.
That's a lot. That's why that education is important.
Exactly.
So transitioning to our other Padlet, which we have, which is engaging transgender, gender-non-conforming, and non-binary people. So the concerns for this population is a little bit different. So when we talk about barriers to engaging this population, transgender, gender non-conforming, and non-binary people, what are some barriers that kind of are related to them in regards to PrEP? I have an idea, but I'm gonna let y'all go first.
Barriers to PrEP, because I'm thinking now is just like they had the issues with birth control. If I give you the birth control, that gives you free reign to have as much sex as you want. Same thing with PrEP. If you're on PrEP, then I can sleep with whoever I want, but not taking into consideration that PrEP does not protect you from STDs. So one of the things I think that we are missing is educating too about the usage of PrEP and condom.
Okay, I agree. But I kind of want to push back a little, because whenever I have not push back like on what you said, but kind of push back on the idea that when you talk about PrEP, that you can have sex with whoever you want to. I mean, in all actuality, you could have sex with whoever you want to anyway, PrEP or not. And that's a conversation that I've had a couple of times, is that I think a lot of times people judge the behaviors of people or how people live their lives. They judge that too much, and I like to take the idea that it's not my responsibility to judge one or to even ask about who someone is having sex with. If you're having sex with 10 people and you are taking your health into account, and that is your prerogative. Do I think PrEP is the best way to protect yourself and using condoms? Of course I do. But if you have decided that that's what you would like to do, that's what you like to do. And like I've had a lot of conversations with providers that say that same thing. Oh, well, if I prescribe PrEP, they're just going to have uncontrollable sex. Okay. Are they having uncontrollable sex with you? If not, then that should not be the benchmark for prescribing or talking to someone about PrEP, is the fear of what they're going to do because they're on PrEP. I think that's like an issue, and that also kind of stigmatizes like sexuality or your autonomy over your own sexual activities and your body. It's kind of like people can make those choices for themselves, if that makes sense. Y'all mad at me? Y'all quiet? I agree. Thank you, Jora. I knew you would have my back. I really appreciate that. So one of the barriers that, and I wish that Daniela was here. She's like our kind of like SME in engaged in the transgender and gender non-conforming non-binary population, because she is like a wealth of information about this subject. But I think one of the barriers that I've actually thought about more in working with Daniela is some of the barriers associated with engaging this population in PrEP. It's just there are other needs that kind of take precedent over PrEP. So like some of those needs, like even healthcare needs or things that they need just for their overall well-being, like gender affirming care. And I know that's a difficult like barrier to cross, because gender affirming care may not be readily available in every location or in every city or in every county. It may not be available, but that is something very important to someone who is a part of this demographic. They, that's their top priority, or their main priority is getting their gender affirming care. And so I think that's a major barrier. I'll type it there. I guess I should say other health concerns. And feel free to jump in if y'all want to add anything, or if I'm saying something that doesn't make sense or I need to expound on.
Well, Sheila, that is definitely one of the areas that we've found that our gender non-conforming and trans community had to deal with. And yes, last year for National Trans HIV AIDS, I'm not sure that it was awareness day, testing day. One of the things that we did was to bring together all our different partners who provide trans care and gender non-conforming care. We brought them together and we had a panel discussion, and they presented and talking about what they do, what's available out there right here in Alabama, because we were getting anecdotes of people going to Georgia and other places in order to get the care that they needed. And we were finding out that though it's not widespread, but we do have agencies and so on, including UAB, that has a special clinic just for trans care and gender non-conforming. So we thought it was important to bring that out to the community and let them know. It should still be up on our Start Talking Alabama Facebook page. So if anybody is interested, they could probably go through it and scroll down and find that discussion and see what information is out there on that.
Thank you. It's so good to hear that, there are some resources there to provide the needs of this population. Thank you for sharing. Another barrier that I can think of would be just since we're talking about cultural responsiveness, like if you dead name somebody, and dead naming is when you use like their birth name instead of using the name that they have chosen, or even misgendering somebody could be a real barrier to, even wanting overall healthcare, not even just PrEP, but, if someone goes into the office and says, hey, I want to get PrEP, and somebody misgenders them at the front desk, that is, that person may not want to come back. That may push them totally away from even coming back to the organization, period, to get care, or even to even engage in getting something like any type of healthcare at all. So being culturally responsive is another thing that could, or cultural, I don't know what would be I'm trying to think of the right word to say, cultural, I'm drawing a blank on that. Dead naming. Oh yes, dead naming is when you call someone by their former name. If they have changed their name and they go by another name and you call them their previous name, that's called dead naming.
Yeah.
Providing care to someone and I'm not aware of that, how do I navigate that? Because if I've known you in the past as such person, said person, and you've changed your name, what am I to do as a provider, healthcare provider, as a providing care services?
That's a good question. So one thing that you can say is, what would you like me to call you when you're having a conversation, or how would you like me to refer to you, or what are your pronouns? And that's the easy way to kind of open up the conversation for them to provide you with what their chosen name is. So that's usually what I'll say. If I'm uncertain, or if I knew them previously on another name, I'll be like, what do you want me to call you? And usually they'll tell you, the person will tell you, oh, my name is X, Y, and Z. And then that's an easy way to kind of not only engage that person and meet them where they are, but also that lets them know that you are taking into account their experiences and their needs.
If I may jump in here, if you've met someone who you knew prior to their transition, and you walk up to them and you call them by their dead name, they will correct you and say, well, I go by this name. You may, say quickly, oh, I didn't know. Thank you for informing me, letting me know, and ensure that you continue to use that new name rather than the dead name. You may even want to put it in your records or whatever, so that other people who within your agency or within your healthcare setting can see that it's on their it's in their chart what the union is, whether it's legal or not, but it's there, and then so you can use the proper name and proper pronouns.
I've seen like paperwork at my doctor's office. It will say like it'll say like your name, and then it'll say like name you like to be referred to on there. So you can have the option to do either one.
When I worked at an organization that provided HIV care, in our system, it was set up to also have that block. So even when you printed out information, it had the legal, but in parentheses, it had their chosen name, and you knew to go by that. It even prompted you. It prompted you for pronouns and everything else. So I would say even that. Granted, I'm sure we also don't have a lot of autonomy or variance when it looks into the systems that we use to provide the services that we do. But those small nuances and upgrades can be very important towards your staff, because it also shows that you're dedicated to what that looks like, to that you're investing in services and platforms and software that are that are gender sensitive, and that automatically put that information in for you.
Very true. I know that I'm not really sure, like EHRs, I know that they have like tried to become more inclusive with genders. I actually attended a webinar that talked about how the electronic health workers are trying to be more inclusive with some of the things that you are allowed to notate inside of like someone's health record. So I guess not only are people catching up with some cultural responsiveness, but so is technology, which is important since we lean on technology for a lot. Did anyone want to add anything else to barriers that may be present in engaging this population?
And of course, I want to be the typical stuff, and I of course I want to say stigma, but stigma along the lines of is someone in their trans experience, the goal may ultimately be to not be identified as being trans, just as what their new trans identity is, and to them engaging in PrEP or being in proximity to communities that do is a giveaway for them. So it's navigating what that looks like to recognize that I'm at a higher risk of contracting HIV, so I should be on PrEP. But in order to pursue PrEP, I have to be around environments where arguably I could get clogged. So that's also a layer that a lot of people don't consider. I have a very close trans friend, and she stopped going to like public places with us. And we were like, so what's going on? What's happening? She said, at least for me and my trans identity, it seems odd for me as a woman to be in a group of 5 to 6 other men out casually having fun. And for her, it was a danger thing because people are going to assume that she's trans, because why else would a woman be around 6 other men? And that was something that we never considered or thought about. And she was like, so I have to navigate differently.
I mean, I've never thought about it like that, but I mean, I see where she's coming from. I mean, personally, I have a lot of male friends. So I hang around a large group of, actually my friend group is mostly male, and I have like maybe 4 or 5 female or women that identify as women, cisgender women, as my friends. So it's like I have been in that setting where it's only been me and a whole bunch of guys. And honestly, for me, I feel like protected, but I can understand how I never thought about it in that way, but I can see how that would be a concern. Like, they say birds of a feather flock together, or like groups or common groups hang out together. So like maybe in her pursuit of not being clocked, she wants to not hang out with a large group of people. I get it. I understand that. I never thought about stigma in that way, or like maybe frequenting, because when we talk about prep, we talked about it yesterday. Like prep is marketed mostly towards, MSM. Like that's what the idea is that prep is marketed towards gay men or MSM. And so if you want to be on prep, or if you're engaging in prep, like does that affect the way people look at you or perceive you?
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just put stigma. That was a great conversation though, Demetrius. Thank you for sharing that. Every time I put something, it slides over and I think it put it on the other side.
Yeah.
It's weird. So do we have any more additions to this barriers section? All right. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. And I don't think Carla's back with us, so we're gonna have to. Well, the next one is for women, and we talked a lot. I think like the conversation that we had yesterday around stigma can really inform our conversation on the Padlet in regards to women. I'm finally getting this screen sharing thing together. Okay. So of course we talked a lot about women. This particular Padlet does not specify a specific type of woman, because to be quite honest, we talked a lot about Black women and women of color yesterday, but women in general are left out of the conversation when it comes to sexual health. I actually did a research, a project quite a while ago. I did a project on knowledge of sexual health amongst women, college-aged women. And I live in a place where there is a major HBCU and there's a major PWI in the same city. So I went to both campuses and I conducted my research. And what I found in my research was that when we're talking about white women and sexual health, in that research that I did, the white women that I interviewed on Florida State's campus knew nothing about getting an HIV test. They knew nothing about getting an HIV test. They didn't know where they can get an HIV test from. I asked them if they use condoms. They said they did use condoms, but not all the time. And this was, I think, this was in like 2015. So PrEP had been approved. But of course, by that time, during that time, there was like hardly any type of marketing towards women at all. And so when I asked them about PrEP, every woman I talked to, no matter the ethnicity or the race, every woman I talked to said, I don't need that. That's nothing I would even be interested in. But I was very shocked that, when I interviewed white women, that they had no idea about like where to get an HIV test from. When I spoke to Black women, maybe it was because during that time, I was also a peer educator. So we did a lot of tabling events and we had testing on the health center. I had done tabling myself, so I knew we passed out a lot of information. Maybe that was the difference. Maybe I'm not sure, but I was truly blown away that, some of the women I spoke with didn't even know anything about getting an HIV test, had never had one and didn't know where to get one. So for the sake of this Padlet that doesn't specifically identify a specific group of people, a group of women, I think we should like think about the barriers to engaging women in general. And we can also talk about Black women. Of course, we know we need to have more representation, more engagement of women, period, when it comes to prep. So those are some of the barriers that we had talked about yesterday as well. I just wanted to see, and if are there any more barriers that you all can think of? Feel free to jump in. Well, I'll go ahead and put, I guess like lack of engagement.
Should I be referring to just in terms of engaging women?
Yeah, so this particular Padlet is specifically for engaging women.
Okay. Well, I'm not a woman, so this is a question out to the ladies. The fact that women have the concerns of birth control, and then would your birth control method, I mean, other than the pill, would they help in terms of preventing HIV or STDs? I know there are some that have like spermicides and so on that may kill HIV or prevent the transmission of HIV. Is that a factor?
I'm gonna open this up to our participants. I am not very knowledgeable about that when it comes to birth control.
Don't be shy, ladies. I want to know.
They're being shy today. I'm not very knowledgeable about birth control, but what I can say is that I have heard of easing the engagement of women, and even taking a step back and talking about the trans and gender non-conforming that we just talked about, coupling appointments for, if you're going to get an appointment for your refill on birth control or your follow-up appointment for birth control, coupling that with a prep appointment is a way to kind of engage women. Also, when we're talking about trans community, coupling like gender affirming care appointments along with prep appointments is a way to kind of meet both of those needs at the same time. When it comes to whether birth control affects like HIV prevention, I'm not 100% sure. I do know they make condoms with spermicide, but I am not sure about the actual birth control. So I know I didn't fully answer your question, but that's kind of what I know about it. And if anyone would like to add in on that, or has another answer or some more information about that, please feel free to jump in at any time. If not, I
must have hit you with a big one. Sorry, ladies.
I can look up some information about that and try to give you a definite answer. I am not 100% sure right now, but I will try to find out for you. Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone else have any other barriers related to engaging women in prep? So we said lack of engagement, just overall engaging women in, conversations about prep or education about prep. Another barrier I could think of, like women tend to, I don't know if this falls under risk perception, but women tend to put themselves last, especially if they are like the head of a family or something like that. They put themselves last. They're the last person to go to the doctor if something is going on. They're the last person to, to kind of get their health checked out. And And so because of that, there's like sometimes things can just fall by the wayside, and things can just get passed up. And so that is a barrier. I guess I think I would name that not risk perception, but like I'm trying to think of a good term to call that. Not placing priority on themselves. Uh-oh. I thought it. I'm always on my family members to go to the doctor. It doesn't matter if you have a headache. I'm gonna be like, have you been to the doctor? Because I don't like the doctor, but I'm not afraid to go to the doctor. If something is going on, I'm going to the doctor. You can ask any of my friends; they will tell you. I will go to the emergency room. I will go to urgent care. I don't care. If something's going on, I need to figure out what the problem is. If I have a pain that's lasted too long, I'm on my way because I need to figure out what is going on. Maybe I'm a little paranoid, but that's just how I operate. And I'm like that with everyone in my family. Like if they tell me that something is going on, my aunt told me she had a headache for like 2 days. I was like, can you go to the emergency room? Like maybe you have like high blood pressure or something. Like you need to figure it out. Like I'm really on people about going to the doctor. It's more difficult with my brothers, but they have been listening to me because I keep talking about it. So that is definitely a barrier in engaging women, is making sure that they take care of themselves. And as someone mentioned in the chat, Kelsey, lack of self-care. Yes, women will always put themselves behind their families or their partners to make sure they're okay, but kind of like fall by the wayside on their own self-care. Some other barriers to engaging women in prep. Trying to think of some other, because we talked about a lot. We talked about stigma. We talked about just the lack of representation. Women don't particularly see, or we can also just add in what we talked about, lack of perceived risk as well. And I just wanted to open up, see if anyone else has any other comments while I put this one on to the board. All right. I think y'all real quiet today. We've had a little, let me see. I think someone mentioned in the chat, fear of being judged as promiscuous. Yes. Fear of judgment is a great one. I cannot spell today. Judgment. Yeah. So I think we have a good amount of barriers listed here in engaging women in prep and increasing their prep uptake. So as we mentioned yesterday, Demetrius did such a great job of explaining the purpose of the Padlet to serve as kind of a guide to help us build and kind of build a robust prep, not only programming within our individual organizations, but a network of prep providers and prep programming in Alabama. And so, as we mentioned before, these Padlets are a great way to have like a common sharing space for not only barriers that you all have witnessed, but also ways that you can build upon it. And also on this particular Padlet and the other two that we talked about today, there's a good amount of resources on there. I actually have hosted a Prep and Black Women Roundtable, which is at this YouTube link here. And on that roundtable, I met with, yes, you all should have received an email with the links for this afternoon a little bit ago. They were working on troubleshooting that. So sorry about that confusion. But if you have some time, you can check out the Prep and Black Women Roundtable. I hosted it with Leisha McKinley Beach, who is from Atlanta. She's like a really big force in the HIV prevention field. And I also have Kiara Dale Adenola, who is from Florida, but she works at the health department. And they both are really powerful figures in HIV prevention. So if you have some time, check that out. We have also done roundtables with PrEP users, and we did a webinar with a PrEP provider as well, which I will share on the Who below, so you can look at as a resource as well.